I saved her from her wounds." Then she whispered, "Human, do you know I'm a queen?" The crash site was 3 kilometers off the designated survey corridor, which meant nobody was supposed to be there, which meant Corporal Eli Vance was technically breaking about 4 standing orders just by walking toward the smoke. He walked toward it anyway. The Oreth Expanse was not a place that rewarded hesitation. A decision delayed in the Expanse was usually a death arrived at slowly, through thirst, or the wrong kind of cold, or one of the spine-ridged predators that moved through the basalt fields at dusk like shadows that had learned to hunt. Eli had been stationed at Outpost Kether for 11 months. He knew the Expanse's manners better than he knew his own. At this point, knew the way it changed smell before a temperature drop, knew the specific silence of the mid-afternoon when the thermal shift sent every creature in the basalt field 300 meters lower than they'd been at noon. He knew which formations held shadow worth using, and which ones collected the kind of heat that would kill you. 11 months was enough to know a place. It was also enough to know that black smoke rising from the eastern ridge at 1400 hours in a clear sky was not the Expanse's doing. Something else had done that. He checked his medkit by feel without looking down. Full. He'd restocked it that morning out of habit and out of 11 months of understanding that the Expanse did not wait for you to be prepared. That the difference between a useful medkit and a dead weight was the decision made when there was nothing specific requiring it. He shifted the kit's carry strap, checked his compass bearing against the ridge line, and kept walking. The smoke was thinner by the time he reached the crest, half dispersed by the steady north wind that the ridge channeled into something almost cold. He looked down into the bowl below, a shallow impact crater, maybe 40 meters across, still steaming at the edges where superheated hull metal had cooled against the basalt. The vessel, if you could call what remained a vessel, had come down nose first and broken along the spine. One forward section lay more or less intact. The rest was scattered in a debris arc that caught the afternoon light like broken mirror pieces. Equipment cases, a section of what had been a port hull, something that might have been a crew station console, folded almost entirely flat against a basalt outcrop. No emergency beacon. That was the first thing he registered, the practiced first check before descent, before movement into the crater. Whatever had come down here either didn't carry one, or it had been disabled before the crash, or whoever had survived was making a deliberate choice to stay dark. The absence of an emergency beacon on a crash site of this size was not an accident. It was a decision. Eli cataloged that and moved. He descended into the bowl carefully, weight back on his heels, watching the debris field for pressure leaks and unstable hull plates. The basalt was still warm underfoot near the crater rim, and the smell was sharp with scorched electronics, and something faintly biological that he didn't recognize, not unpleasant, just unfamiliar in the way of species he hadn't encountered yet. He moved through the outer arc of debris, the navigation housing still blinking an amber fault light, a crew harness torn at one shoulder point, and reached the intact forward section in under 3 minutes. The access panel was buckled but not fused. He pried it with his multi-tool, worked the seam for about 90 seconds, and got it open. He heard breathing before he saw anything. Labored, wet at the edges, chest involvement of some kind, the character of it told him that before anything else. Someone was alive in there, and someone's chest was working harder than it should. "Hello." He kept his voice even and non-threatening. Outpost Kether had 3 xenobiologists on rotation over the past 11 months, and Eli had absorbed enough of their briefings to know that volume and bared teeth were a bad opening sequence with most species. "I'm coming in. I'm not armed, my sidearms in the holster, but my hands are empty, and I'm going to keep them that way. I'm going to help. That's all." The breathing didn't change register. He climbed through the panel gap. The interior was dim, the emergency lighting reduced to a faint amber strip along the floor that flickered with every small shift of the settling hull. It smelled of scorched circuitry, and something organic and very faintly sweet beneath the acrid top note. Specific to the biology present, he suspected, the kind of scent a species produced that was simply part of how they smelled. His eyes adjusted fast. He had spent enough nights in Kether's poorly lit maintenance corridors to be functional in low ambient light quickly. She was in the pilot's seat, which had partially deployed its crash harness on impact. The harness had taken some of the work for her. The impact itself had done the rest. He took her in quickly and medically, because that was how he'd been trained, and because stopping to process her as anything other than a patient right now would cost her seconds he wasn't sure she had. Female, alien, elongated frame, proportions slightly longer in the limbs than human, 4 fingers on each hand, the skin a pale silver green that he could see was losing saturation at the extremities even in the dim amber light. Hair that was either white or very pale silver, matted now with something dark along the left temple. Eyes closed. Facial structure angular and fine-boned. The jaw a little stronger than a human woman's jaw, the ears coming to a soft point at the tips and resting flat against her skull. Whether from pain response or natural rest position, he couldn't yet tell. She was wearing something that had once been formal. Layered robes in dark blue and silver, a fabric with a subtle structure to it that wasn't manufactured for durability, but for appearance, now torn across the left shoulder, scorched at the hem, the fastening at the neck half pulled loose by the harness deployment. Not field gear. Not a flight suit. Whatever she'd been doing before the crash, she hadn't been dressed for the expanse's floor. That was a problem for later. Everything about her was a problem for later. The only problem that mattered right now was the breathing. "Okay," Eli said, mostly to himself, settling into the professional mode that cleared everything extraneous from the field of view. "Let's see what we're working with." Her breathing was the first and primary priority. He ran his hands along her ribcage. She flinched, sharply and involuntarily, which told him 2 things. She was closer to consciousness than the closed eyes suggested, and there was damage on that side. He worked the external assessment carefully, feeling the structural irregularity at 2 points on her left lateral chest wall. Fractured, he thought, not fully displaced but clearly giving when he applied gentle anterior pressure. The lung on that side was probably bruised but not collapsed. Her breath sounds, when he pressed his ear close in lieu of a stethoscope he hadn't thought to pack, were present in both fields. He taped the site with the wide trauma wrap from the kit, applied pressure gauze, and moved to her head. The wound at her temple was superficial in the grand reckoning of head wounds, which meant it was bleeding extensively while being structurally unimportant. He cleaned it with the saline wipe, got a good look at the laceration under the matted hair, and closed the worst of the split with strip closures. A coagulation pad went over the site. The bleeding slowed in under 90 seconds, which was better than he'd expected, and probably said something favorable about her coagulation cascade. Her left arm was the other problem, and it was the most clearly defined one. A fracture of the forearm, the bone not through the skin but close enough to the surface that the shape of the break was visible under the silver-green skin in a way that made his jaw tighten reflexively. Clean break, no obvious rotation. He stabilized it with the inflatable splint, moved as carefully as he had been trained to move, and watched her face the whole time. She came back to consciousness the way you came up from deep water, gradual, and then all at once. Her eyes opened. They were amber, but not the warm gold amber that the word typically brought to mind. This was a cooler, more complex shade, something like amber glass held to low light, and the pupils were vertical slits that widened immediately in the interior dimness. They moved not unfocused, not drifting directly to his face. He stayed still and kept his hands visible. "Easy," he said. "You're injured. I've stabilized what I can reach. 2 broken ribs on your left side and a fracture in your left forearm, both manageable. Head wound is superficial. Your breathing sounds intact for now, but I need to keep monitoring it." She didn't speak immediately. She did something that he noted with a particular kind of professional respect. She looked at him, then at his hands, then at the medkit open beside him, then at the emergency lighting, then at the cracked hull beyond, then back to his face. She was taking inventory. She was hurt and probably in significant pain, and she was taking inventory of her situation in calm sequence before she said anything. When she finally spoke, her voice was rough and low from the impact and the dust and probably some amount of shock, but steady. "You are human." "Corporal Eli Vance, human, yes. Stationed at Outpost Kether, 3 kilometers west-southwest." He kept his tone even and practical, the same tone he used for everything, not reassuring voice, which he'd always thought patronizing, just the actual register he spoke in. "Can you tell me your name? And any medical information I should know, species-specific drug responses, prior conditions, anything that might complicate treatment when I move you?" She considered the question, not the way a disoriented person considered a simple question, the way someone with multiple available answers considered which one to give. "My name is Sarath," she said. "I have no known compound allergies that I'm aware of. My species does not tolerate temperature drops well. The cold here gets to about 4 degrees overnight," Eli said. "We're not going to be here at overnight. I'm going to get you out of this hull and back to Kether before the light changes." Sarath's amber eyes held his for a moment. "You are very certain of that?" "I'm working on it," he said, which was honest. "How is the pain?" A pause. "Present." "That's going to remain present. The ribs especially. There's a topical compound in the kit that may take the edge off, but I want to understand your biology a little better before I administer anything systemic. Can you rate the pain? And can you tell me if breathing itself hurts or just the sight?" "Both," she said. "Breathing is the larger problem. The sight is manageable. Shallow breaths for now. Don't force depth. Let your body find the level that doesn't protest and stay there. Tell me if that changes, or if you feel pressure building in the chest." "I understand." He believed her, which was itself worth noting. She spoke like someone who had been briefed on injuries before, or who had been injured before and understood the language of it. He made a note of that and kept working. The crash harness was still engaged over her. He found the manual release after 2 attempts. The buckle design was unfamiliar. A 4-point system with a center press mechanism he had to work out by feel, and got it clear of her body without moving her arm or pressing against the rib site. "When I help you stand," he said, "your weight goes through your right side, right arm on my shoulder. Your left arm stays close to your body and doesn't take any load. The ribs will tell you when you try to breathe deeply, don't. Tell me when you're ready." "I am ready." He helped her up. She was taller than she'd appeared in the chair, close to his height, perhaps just under it, and the elongated proportions of the limbs gave her a quality of presence that the torn robes didn't quite erase. When she got her feet under her, she found her balance against him without either leaning heavily or pulling away, assessed her own stability the way you assessed weight distribution on uncertain ground, and gave him a single nod. "All right," he said. "We move together slow." They got out through the panel gap, one careful step at a time, Eli taking the angle that kept her injured side away from the panel edge. Outside, the afternoon light was still hard and direct. The expanse's light had no mercy to it, no diffusion from clouds, and he watched Sarath's face tighten at the brightness, the amber eyes narrowing to near slits before adjusting. She looked at the debris arc. Then she looked at the trajectory the debris arc was describing, back up toward the ridge, calculating, reading the angle of the descent from the wreckage pattern on the ground. Eli had seen pilots do that. He'd seen people with flight experience do that involuntarily, the way a doctor counted a pulse before they'd decided to, because some things became automatic after long enough. "What brought you down?" he asked, starting them moving toward the crater rim. "A targeting strike," she said. Even on the move, managing the uneven basalt carefully, she kept the assessment voice. Engine suppressor fired at approximately 80,000 meters altitude. The loss of primary drive at that altitude produces a specific descent profile. She paused, probably because speaking for too long was pressing on the rib site. The fall lasted longer than I would have preferred. Someone shot you down deliberately. Yes. Are they going to come looking for the site? She was quiet for 3 steps. They will come looking, she said. They will not expect to find a human outpost's response. They will expect to find wreckage and a body. Eli kept moving. He turned the implications of that over in his mind and put them in the background for now. They mattered. They would matter a great deal within the next several hours. But right now they mattered less than the 3 kilometers between here and the outpost's gate. Then we should be somewhere else before they arrive, he said. Yes, Sarah said, we should. She walked steadily. He had expected her to flag 2 broken ribs and a fractured arm, even stabilized, was a meaningful load for a body already managing the metabolic cost of shock, but she did not flag. She maintained the pace with an effort that was visible only in specific controlled details, the particular quality of her breathing, precisely shallow and precisely even, the way her free hand at her side opened and closed in a small rhythmic motion that he suspected was her version of a counting pain technique, the way her eyes moved continuously over the ground ahead, picking line without appearing to think about it. She had done this kind of thing before, moved through significant pain while remaining functional. He could see the training in it. You've practiced this, he said, when they'd cleared the crater rim and were onto the flatter ground of the mid-expanse. Moving hurt. She looked at him sidelong. Practiced is perhaps too organized a word for it. Experienced it enough that you have a technique. A pause, yes. Military. Of a kind, she said, then, you ask direct questions. It's faster, Eli said, and I'm trying to understand what I'm working with medically. The type of prior experience with injuries can tell me something about tolerance thresholds. Sarath seemed to consider this. That is a practical answer to a personal question. Is it bothering you? No, she said. It is simply unexpected. Another careful breath. I have been in situations that required continued function through pain, multiple times. The training, such as it was situational, learned rather than taught. That's usually the better kind, Eli said. She glanced at him again, and this time there was something in the amber eyes that was not inventory and not assessment, something more open and slightly surprised by itself. How far? She said after a moment. He checked his bearing against the antenna tower. Just under 2 kilometers. 20 minutes at this pace, maybe a little more. That is manageable. Let me know if it stops being manageable. I will, she said, in a tone that suggested she probably wouldn't, and he appreciated the honesty of that. The expanse did its usual things around them. The thermal shift sending a brief rattle through a formation of basalt columns 20 meters to their left. A pair of the low, fast-moving arid birds that lived in the rock fissures launching past at head height and banking south. The wind moving over the flat ground in long, consistent pushes that were almost pleasant in the direct heat of mid-afternoon. Eli knew this terrain well enough to route without thinking, keeping them on the most even ground, avoiding the formations that looked navigable but had subsidence issues he'd found the hard way in month 3. He thought about the no-emergency beacon. He thought about the formal robes. He thought about they will expect to find wreckage and a body. Someone had tried to kill her and had been careful about it. Careful enough to use a weapon that would look like equipment failure at the wrong altitude. Careful enough that she'd been running dark. A person who ran dark in a targeting situation was either very well trained or very aware of their value as a target, usually both. He didn't ask. The expanse required attention underfoot, and the conversation was a secondary resource. Some things would come clear in time. Outpost Kether's perimeter fence emerged from the thermal shimmer at the distance he'd estimated, the gate's security light a steady green in the afternoon glare. Eli keyed his comm as they reached the approach. "Kether, this is Vance. Returning with a survivor from an unidentified crash site, alien female, injuries. Fractured ribs left side, fractured left forearm, head laceration, possible thoracic bruising. Need the medical bay clear, warm, and set up for a patient who doesn't tolerate cold. Also need Dr. Haverford. Over." A 3-second pause. Then Sergeant Obi Nwachukwu's voice, carrying the calm of someone who had processed 11 months of whatever Eli brought back from the field and made his peace with it. "Copy that, Vance. Medical bay is yours. Haverford's already heading there. Anything else on the survivor?" Eli looked at Sarath. She had been watching the outpost approach, the fence, the structures beyond it, the landing pad's wind sock, with the same systematic attention she'd given the crash site and the debris arc, taking in information and organizing it. "Not yet," he said. "Brief you inside." Kether's medical bay was a single room off the main corridor, warm by outpost standards and lit by the incandescent backup fixtures that had been the permanent lighting since the primary system had given up in week 3. Dr. Haverford had made her peace with the amber light. Eli had made his peace with almost everything about Kether. It was that kind of posting, the kind that demanded adaptation or broke you, and he had adapted. He got Sarath onto the examination pallet, elevated the torso slightly to ease rib pressure, brought the room's heater to its upper register, and went back to the medkit with the methodical rhythm of someone who found task completion steadying in uncertain situations. Sarath had gone quiet during the last stretch of the walk. He'd watched it happen, the narrowing of focus to the single task of forward movement. The external resources conserved to feed whatever internal process was managing the pain. When she finally settled onto the pallet and let the inclined surface take some of the work, the exhale she produced was precisely controlled, deliberately slow, deliberately even, the exhalation of someone who had decided how long it would last before it began. "Still manageable?" he asked. "Yes," a fractional pause, "marginally less than before." "That's honest. I appreciate it." He was already at the kit. "There's a topical compound I want to apply to the rib site. It won't touch bone pain, but it'll reduce the muscle layer involvement significantly. Before I do that, I want to know, does anything about your species' biology respond badly to topical analgesic compounds? Skin reaction, inflammatory response, anything?" "I have no known topical sensitivities. I'm going to apply it and then watch the site for 5 minutes before I proceed. Tell me if anything changes, burning, spreading numbness beyond the site, any sensation that feels wrong." "I understand." The compound went on carefully, spread with a gloved applicator. He watched. Nothing adverse. After 5 minutes, the slight change in her controlled breathing, a fractional easing, like someone who had been holding their shoulders elevated and let them drop half a centimeter, told him it was working. Haverford arrived. She was a slight woman in her 40s who wore reading glasses pushed up onto her forehead as a permanent ornament, and had the perpetually mildly startled expression of someone who specialized in xenobiology, because the universe kept producing things to be startled by. She came in with her tablet and her assessment tools, took in Sarath on the pallet, processed something visibly behind the mildly startled expression, and introduced herself to the patient by name and function in a tone of professional respect that Eli thought Sarath noticed. "May I examine you?" Haverford asked. "I want to understand your biology well enough to support Corporal Vance's treatment correctly." Sarath's amber eyes moved to the doctor. "Yes," she said, "though I think you will find it more straightforward than you anticipate." Haverford raised one eyebrow slightly. The other one was already elevated by default, and began a careful physical assessment, working with the practiced efficiency of someone who had examined many species and understood that efficiency was itself a form of respect. She went through it without comment, asked 2 technical questions in the middle, and straightened when she was done. She looked at Eli. Then she looked at Serath's right hand, which was resting on the pallet at her side, uninjured, with the fingers slightly curved. There was a ring on the second finger. Not large, not ornate in the way of ceremonial jewelry designed for visibility. Old, clearly. The metal carried the specific depth of very old worked metal, a deep silver black with a warmth to it that was intrinsic rather than polished, and a single inlaid stone that sat somewhere between green and gold in color and shifted between the two depending on the angle of the amber light. Haverford looked at it for a long moment. Her mildly startled expression became something considerably more careful. "That," she said in a controlled voice, "is a Vorin compact sovereign seal." Serath's eyes moved to her without urgency. "Yes," she said. Haverford looked at Eli. "I need a moment." They stepped into the corridor. Haverford closed the medical bay door with the deliberateness of someone who wanted it closed for a reason, turned, pushed her glasses off her forehead, and looked at him with an expression that was doing several things simultaneously. "Eli," she said, "I need you to understand what that ring is. I have seen photographs of it in the Vorin Compact Survey Archive. There are 3 compact sovereign seals in existence. The first belongs to the planetary governor of Sorvath Prime. The second is held in a heritage preservation vault on Voraneth. The third is worn by the current ruling sovereign of the Vorin Compact." Eli was very still. "The Vorin Compact," Haverford continued, in the specific tone of someone who knew they were saying something significant and wanted it to land correctly, comprises 46 inhabited systems. It controls the primary mineral extraction and transit routes through this entire sector. It has been the dominant political entity in a 5-system radius for approximately 300 years. She paused. The current ruling sovereign came to power 14 months ago after her mother's death. Her coronation was recorded in every diplomatic database I have access to. Her name is Serath, Eli said. Haverford closed her mouth. "She gave me the name when I found her," Eli said. "She didn't give me anything else." The corridor was quiet. Through the medical bay door, he could hear the faint sound of Serath's breathing, which was steadier now than it had been in the crater. "She's a queen," he said. "She is the queen," Haverford said, "of 46 systems. Someone apparently fired on her vessel at altitude this afternoon, and she is currently lying on our examination pallet in a room where the primary lighting has been broken for 9 weeks. Another pause. "Eli." "What?" "Are you," she stopped, "reorganized? Does this change anything for you?" Eli thought about this with genuine attention, the way he tried to think about things she asked him when she was asking them seriously. "Medically," he said. "Medically or otherwise?" "Medically, no. She still has fractured ribs and a broken arm and a head wound. Those are the same problems they were 20 minutes ago." He looked at the door. "Otherwise, I need to get a relay message to the Compact's diplomatic contact for this sector as quickly as Kether's comm system can manage it. And I need to think about what we're doing about security before morning, because whoever shot her down is going to look for the site." Haverford stared at him for a moment. Then she made a sound that started as something else and ended as a short, helpless laugh. "Right," she said. "I'll pull the Vorin medical data from the Xenobiology archive. There's a survey paper." "Anything I should know urgently?" "Inflammatory response," she said, shifting back into clinical mode. "Their immune cascade is more aggressive than ours on wound sites. Infection risk escalates fast. Watch the rib site and the arm fracture closely. Otherwise, the treatment you've already done is correct. The topical was the right call. The splint angle looked good when I assessed it. Cold tolerance. Low, keep the room warm." Eli nodded. "Give me 5 minutes with her, and then I'm going to the comm desk." "I'll start on the diplomatic contact list," Haverford said and went. Eli went back in. He did not bring up the ring. He did not bring up the sovereign seal or the 46 systems or the 14 months of rulership or the targeting strike red against that background. He told himself it was because she would raise it when she was ready, and that was a professional reading, and it was mostly correct. The truth that lived under the professional reading was quieter. She had given him the name Sarath and withheld everything else deliberately, and the withholding had been a decision, and he was going to honor it until she chose otherwise. She was hurt. She was in a foreign outpost. Someone was trying to kill her, and she had handed him exactly as much information as she decided to hand him. That was her right. He checked the rib wrap. He reset the splint angle by 3 degrees, which was slightly better. He brought the room temperature up another notch when he saw the faint fine shiver that ran through her arms at an interval that suggested it was involuntary rather than controlled. "Cold?" he asked. "Somewhat," she said, which from her likely meant considerably. He got the second thermal blanket from the storage locker and arranged it over her without commentary, and she let him and said nothing. Around the second hour she slept. He stayed, not because the chair was comfortable, it wasn't, but because a chest injury patient sleeping alone in a room without monitoring equipment was not a situation he was willing to create. He worked through the comm messages on his tablet, the relay query he'd sent to Kether's diplomatic frequency for the compact sector liaison, the notification to Sergeant Nwachukwu about the security posture for the night. He kept the room warm. He watched the strip closures on her temple for sign of breakdown, and the rib site for sign of inflammatory response. Nwachukwu appeared in the doorway at some point, looked at the sleeping figure on the pallet, looked at Eli, and did the eyebrow movement that was his version of a question. Eli made the hand sign that meant asterisk later, and Nwachukwu, who had survived 11 months of later with him, and had generally found that the laters were worth waiting for, nodded once and left. She woke in the deep part of the night, the heater cycling steadily through its upper register, the amber light low and fixed. Eli had his tablet in his hands but wasn't reading it. He'd been watching the even rise and fall of her breathing for the past 15 minutes in the particular mode of watching that happens at the edge of the night when attention becomes its own thing. He set the tablet down when he heard the character of her breathing change. "Water," he said, and had it ready before she had to ask for it. Sarath took the container with her right hand, drank carefully and completely, and handed it back. Her color had improved through the night. The silver green had depth to it again, the saturation returning as her body redistributed resources from the acute phase of the shock response. Her eyes, when they opened and found him in the amber light of the chair, were clear. She looked at him for a moment without speaking. He waited the way he had been waiting. "You have been here all night," she said. "A few hours of it, a small distinction that was mostly honest. You did not have to remain." Monitoring a patient with a chest injury in an unfamiliar environment is not optional, Eli said. It's standard protocol. Sarath's expression shifted, the very small shift he'd noticed she used for things that landed with her, the slight deepening of the lines at the corners of her eyes, something that was in the direction of a smile without quite being one. "Standard protocol," she said. "Consistently applied." She was quiet for a moment. Outside, the expanse wind was up. He could hear it at the outpost's north wall, the low, sustained push of it across the basalt field, carrying the cold of the elevation. The heater cycled up half a register in response. "You are not what I expected," Sarath said. "What did you expect?" She appeared to consider whether to answer this with its full weight or its abbreviated version. She chose the full one. "I have encountered human outpost operations before," she said, "in this sector and adjacent ones. They are generally careful with resources, calibrated. The decision to walk toward an unidentified crash site that is off-corridor is not a decision most human outpost personnel would make. Sergeant Nwachukwu would agree with you about the decision." But you made it anyway. There was smoke, Eli said. There was someone in there. Those two things were sufficient. Sarath was quiet in a way that was thinking rather than resting. He'd learned to distinguish them in the hours since the crash. The restful quiet was slightly heavier, her body releasing tension by degrees. The thinking quiet was still, the amber eyes moving fractionally on something in the middle distance. The people who struck my vessel, she said finally. You said you contacted a relay. Kether's emergency frequency for the compact sector liaison. I relayed a message through them to the chain above. I described a Voran national of significant status requiring emergency extraction from a targeting event, asked them to escalate appropriately, and asked them to not broadcast the location publicly. He paused. I didn't give them your name or your location in the first message. I wanted to understand the security posture better before I did. She was very still. A transport is inbound, he continued. Estimated arrival at first light, 9 hours from now, give or take. You contacted the diplomatic relay, Sarath said, on your own decision. Yes. Under what authority? The authority of a corporal who found a survivor and thought getting her off this rock safely was the priority, Eli said, which is not much authority. If Sergeant Nwachukwu files a complaint with Relay Command about jurisdictional overreach, I'll manage the paperwork. The almost smile came through more clearly this time. She looked at him with an expression he couldn't fully classify, which was becoming a pattern. She had more precision in her face than he was used to reading, the emotional register finer grained, and he was still learning the vocabulary of it. You protected my location, she said. The people who fired on you are going to check the crash site, he said, broadcasting your survival and your position before you had secure extraction seemed like the wrong approach. Yes, she said, it was. The expanse pushed at the wall, the heater answered. The amber light held its steady low level over the pallet and the chair, and the woman on the pallet who was a queen and the man in the chair who was, by any formal measure, a corporal with no particular standing to have done half of what he'd done tonight. How long have you known, she said. Not what do you know, but how long. She had already inferred the what. About 6 hours, he said. Dr. Haverford recognized the ring. And you said nothing. You gave me the name you wanted to give me, Eli said. That felt like your call. Sarath looked at him for a long time. The amber eyes were very quiet. He had the sense of something recalibrating, not dramatic, not sudden, but real, an adjustment to a new weight. Human, she said. It was not the clinical identification of the crash site. It had a different quality. The word weighted with something specific, chosen, the way someone said the name of a thing they were deciding how to hold. She looked at him. The amber eyes in the low amber light, clear and steady and slightly open in a way they had not been in the crash site's hull. Do you know, she said quietly, that I am a queen? The room held still around them. Outside, the wind moved on its own business. I know, Eli said. And you treated me exactly as you would have treated anyone you pulled from the wreckage. Yes. Sarath was quiet. Why? She asked, and it was a genuine question, not rhetorical, not a test of him, not the shape of a question waiting for a specific answer. She actually wanted to know. Eli thought about it with the attention the question deserved. Because it didn't change what you needed, he said. You needed the ribs stabilized and the arm splinted and the head wound closed and to be warm enough to sleep. Your title doesn't alter any of those requirements. You were hurt. I was there and I had the kit. He considered. That's the whole of it. Sarath held his gaze. He could see the question settling, the way something sets when it lands on ground that is actually level. In 46 systems, she said slowly, there are doctors who treat the body with great skill. There are diplomats who treat my office with appropriate care. There are advisors who treat my decisions with useful attention. She paused. There is almost no one who simply treats the person. There's probably some, Eli said. The good doctors do it. Doctors treat symptoms, she said. You treated, she stopped, found the word. You treated what I needed without asking what I was worth first. Those are not the same thing. Eli didn't argue the distinction. He thought she was right about it. She exhaled, very slowly, and this time the exhale was not the controlled release of a breathing technique, but something closer to actual rest. The breath of someone who had arrived somewhere and could stop managing the arrival. The debt, she said, is real. You don't owe me anything, he said. Do not, she said, with the warmth that was the soft edge of authority, tell a queen what she owes. A pause. I am going to sleep now, not because I am tired. Because sleep is what heals the ribs, Eli said. Yes, the almost smile, that. He adjusted the thermal blanket. She closed her eyes. The amber light and the expanse wind and the heater and the even sound of her breathing filled the room in the particular way that a room is filled when someone in it is safe enough to sleep. Eli sat back in the chair. He thought about the shape of the night, the smoke at 1400 hours, the crater bowl, the debris arc, the way she had looked at the wreck with a pilot's eyes, the careful, deliberate choosing of what to give him in the hull. The 3 kilometers of basalt field on 2 broken ribs. The ring on her right hand that was not a ring in any ordinary sense, and the woman wearing it who had not, at any point in the past several hours, required him to understand what she was before she would accept what he could do. He thought this was probably unusual. He thought it might matter, at some point in the future, in ways he wasn't positioned to see yet. He kept watch until the light changed. The morning came as it always did in the expanse. Incrementally, the eastern sky lightening through a spectrum from deep charcoal to gray to the sharp orange line at the ridge before full light arrived with the directness of a statement. Eli had slept in the chair for 3 hours, woke without alarm at 5:30, and felt approximately as though the chair had slept on him, which was usual. Sarath's vitals through the night had been good, breathing clean and bilateral, inflammatory response at the rib site minimal, the head wound showing no signs of the cascade Haverford had flagged. He checked the splint in the early light and found it correctly positioned. He refilled the water container and set it in reach of her right hand. She woke at 600 with the precision of someone whose internal clock continued to function through injury and medication, and a night on a foreign outpost's examination pallet. Her eyes opened, oriented, and found him. Good morning, he said. Good morning. She tested her breath, careful, measured, checking range. The pain is less. The topical wears off overnight. I can reapply after breakfast. Breakfast, she said, as though working out the context. Kether serves something that approximates it at 6:30. I'll bring it here. He paused. And coffee if you want to try it. Fair warning, Kether's coffee is functional rather than good. What is its function? Continuation, he said. When you're tired enough that stopping feels possible, coffee is the reason you don't. Sarath appeared to consider this. I will try it. He brought it at 6:20, along with the outpost standard issue ration pack that was hot and adequate and not much else. She tried the coffee with the careful attention of someone who approached unfamiliar things methodically, arrived at an assessment, and set it down without comment, which he found entirely reasonable. She ate the ration pack slowly and completely, which told him the nausea from the initial shock response had passed. At 6:30, Sergeant Nwachukwu's voice came through the comm. Vance, transport is in range, estimated touchdown in 40 minutes. Also, 4 relay messages waiting at the comms desk, all from Vorin compact diplomatic channels, all marked urgent. Eli looked at Sarath. She had closed her eyes briefly at the word transport asterisk, the faintest shift crossing her face, something releasing, something that had been held through the night against the uncertainty of what the morning would bring. Then the amber eyes opened again and found him. 40 minutes, she said. We should reinforce the rib wrap before the transport vibration cycle, he said. And check the splint position. The transport's going to be a compact class shuttle. I've heard the engine frequency, so the vibration profile will be different from what you're used to. How do you know what a compact class shuttle sounds like? We've had 3 emergency transports in 11 months, Eli said. 2 were standard relay class. 1 was a compact medical shuttle 3 months ago, entirely different harmonic profile in the landing cycle. Sarath watched him while he restocked the medkit and laid out the materials for the wrap reinforcement. There was something in the watching that had been building through the night, some assessment that had started at the crash site hull and had been running continuously, not cataloging threats, which had been her first mode, but cataloging something else. Ask it, he said, without looking up from the kit. A pause. How do you know I want to ask something? You've had that expression for about 20 minutes. He looked up. I've been watching you since the crash. That's not what your concentrating face looks like, and it's not what your pain-managing face looks like. It's a different one. The amber eyes did the thing that was adjacent to a smile. You are observant, she said. Occupational requirement, he said. Field medic training. You learn to read what people's bodies are doing separately from what their voices are saying. She was quiet for a moment. I was going to ask, she said, what you will do after I leave. He started on the wrap reinforcement careful, working around the already present tape, adding the broader layer over the existing stabilization. Same thing I do every day, he said. Survey corridor, monitor the equipment, maintain the medical bay. A pause. Walk towards smoke when I see it. Sarath said nothing. He worked. The silence was easy rather than absent, the kind of silence that has content to it, that is full rather than empty. The debt, she said, when he was finishing the last edge of the wrap. I meant what I said. I know you did. I want you to know what it means from my position. Not the formal version. The compact will send a commendation. There will be a diplomatic record. Those things are procedural and will happen. She waited until he had finished and straightened before she continued. I mean the personal version. You walked towards smoke when it was off corridor and outside your designation, because someone might be alive in it. You treated what you found without asking what it was worth first. You kept the location safe before you knew why it needed keeping. And you sat in that chair all night. She paused, looking at him steadily. Those things together are significant, in my experience of how people behave toward a person whose value they don't yet know. It is not common. Eli held her gaze. He didn't know what to do with that in any practical sense, so he did the thing he always did when he didn't know what to do. He said the true thing. I didn't think about your value, he said. I thought about what the situation required. I know, Sarath said. That is exactly what I mean. He spent the 40 minutes on the checks. Wrap reinforcement, splint position, head wound site, vital assessment. Haverford came in and ran her own parallel assessment, and left again with the expression of someone who had several things to process, and had decided to process them in order at some later point. The transport's landing cycle sounded on the pad at 7:38, the low, distinctive harmonic he'd recognized from the comm, half an octave below the relay standard, which was the compact class profile, and Eli helped Sarath to her feet with the same careful mechanics as the crash site. Weight right, arm close, don't force depth. She stood straight. She moved to the door under her own power, which she had been capable of doing since the previous afternoon, but which, he thought, had a different quality now than it had then, the same capability, a different relationship to it. The entire population of Outpost Kether was apparently occupied with tasks in the corridor and the common room at this exact moment, which was the outpost's form of courtesy. Nwachukwu met them at the exterior door with an expression of careful professional neutrality and no questions, which was his form of the same thing. Transport's here, he said unnecessarily. So I hear, Eli said. The pad was 30 meters from the exterior door. They walked it in the morning light, the expanse's full sun already direct and warm despite the hour, the basalt field copper-colored in the early angle. The transport was larger than the Relay-class sleeker, the hull a deep gray blue that the compact appeared to favor for diplomatic vessels, and it had already deployed a reception ramp. The party at the base of the ramp was, by Kether's experience, extraordinary. 4 Voran officers in dark formal uniform, a medical specialist already moving toward Sarath with a portable diagnostic array and an expression of profound relief, and a woman in senior diplomatic robes who descended the ramp and stopped at its base and performed a bow. Not a greeting bow, not a deferential acknowledgement between people of similar or adjacent status. A low, formal, sustained bow, the full measure of it, the kind that said I recognize what I am standing before, and I am honoring it without reservation. Sarath received it with a nod that was small and complete and entirely natural, the way she would receive rain, not because she expected rain to fall, but because rain was the nature of the thing and she knew how to be in the presence of it. She exchanged rapid words in Voran with the senior diplomat, too fast and too specialized in vocabulary for Eli's functional reading of the language to follow. The diplomat looked at him once, a careful, assessing look that contained several conclusions drawn quickly and gave back nothing, and returned to Sarath. The medical specialist reached them and began a rapid assessment of Sarath's injuries with the portable array, speaking in Voran, and Sarath answered while the assessment proceeded. The specialist paused at the splint, examined the angle, said something, and continued without changing it, which Eli noted. The 4 Voran officers took a perimeter position without being directed to. Professional. Eli stepped back to give the process room. His part of this was done, had been done since the transport landed, arguably since the gate. He turned toward the outpost. Vance. He turned back. She was at the base of the ramp with the morning light full on her, silver-green skin carrying its natural color again. White hair, still marked by the strip closures at her temple, the torn formal robes holding their remaining dignity with the specific quality that was hers and not the robes. The amber eyes were steady and very clear. The debt stands, she said. I have not yet determined its form that will require thought appropriate to its weight, but it stands, and I will find something equal to what I owe, which is not the medical care, though the medical care was correct. It is the other thing. I told you. You told me what you believed was correct, she said, and I am telling you what I know is true. Those are different operations. The soft edge in the sovereign voice, not softness as weakness, but the kind of warmth that authority generates when authority is held by someone who understands what it actually means. A queen does not forget who treated her as a person before she told them she was one. He held her gaze. He thought about the crash site hull in the late afternoon, and the 3 kilometers of basalt field, and the chair in the medical bay through the night, and the moment in the deep quiet when she had turned to him with the amber eyes and said asterisk, "Do you know that I am a queen?" and his answer, which had been true and was still true, and would continue to be true regardless of what the Voran Compact's formal record or Sergeant Nwachukwu's incident report or Relay Command's jurisdictional review eventually concluded. "Will you be all right?" he asked. It was a doctor's question or a person's question. The line between them at this particular distance was thin. "I will be considerably more than all right," Sarath said. In considerable part because a human corporal with poor judgment walked 3 kilometers off his assigned corridor toward smoke at 1400 hours. Consistently applied, Eli said. The smile arrived fully this time, unambiguous, complete, the full expression of a thing held back by control and now no longer requiring it. She held his gaze for a moment with the amber eyes clear and direct, and he held hers, and then she turned and walked up the ramp with her escort closing around her. The medical specialist paused on the way up, turned, and addressed him in accented but precise standard. "The rib stabilization was correct," she said. "The splint angle was correct. The overnight monitoring practice was correct. You were thorough. A beat. She is not an easy patient." "She was cooperative," Eli said. The specialist's expression shifted into something brief and surprised, and he thought fond. "She went up the ramp." The transport lifted at 7:43. Eli watched it from the pad until it was a point of deep gray-blue light against the morning sky, and then until it was the absence of a point, and then until there was only the sky. He went back into the outpost, and found the entire staff of Outpost Kether assembled in the common room with the studied casualness of people who had been there for some time doing completely normal morning things, and had not been watching through the common room window. Sergeant Nwachukwu looked at him across the coffee urn with the expression of a man who had 11 months of practice at patience and was willing to use all of it. "Debrief when you're ready," he said. 20 minutes, Eli said. He went to the medical bay. The pallet held the shape of where she had been, the thermal blankets folded back, the pillows still dented, the coagulation pad packaging and strip closure wrappers in the disposal unit he'd cleared twice in the night. The medkit was open on the counter. Haverford had been through while he was on the pad and had already begun restocking it. He sat in the chair. The expanse's morning light came through the narrow window in the flat direct way of early sun in an open landscape. The basalt field copper and black in the alternation of light and shadow, the ridge to the east still dark on its western face. 3 kilometers. He had walked 3 kilometers yesterday afternoon off his designated corridor and found a crash site with no emergency beacon, and a woman in torn formal robes in a pilot's seat, and managed somehow not to know what he was looking at until Haverford told him, and not to change anything afterward when he did. He thought about "Do you know that I am a queen asterisk?" and about his answer. He thought about there is almost no one who simply treats the person. He thought about the 46 systems and the targeting strike at altitude and the careful deliberate running dark, and the 3 kilometers of basalt on 2 broken ribs with a technique that was learned rather than taught. He thought about the way she had looked at the wreck. He thought about the debt, which she had named twice with the same weight both times, and which he did not know the form of, and which she had said she would find something equal to, and which he suspected she would. He sat for a while in the amber light of the broken fixtures, and the medkit's open case, and the morning that was already full and ongoing outside the window. Then he restocked the kit himself, the remainder of it, the items Haverford had left, and closed it and put it in ready position, and went to give his debrief. The message arrived 14 days later, via the most secure relay channel that Kether's comm system was technically capable of receiving, addressed to Corporal Eli Vance personally and by name. It was written in standard, precise, and formal, and signed with the full sovereign designation *Sarath of the Vorin Compact, holder of the 46, keeper of the Sorveth roots, and it contained a formal letter of commendation recorded with the relevant human military authority, a grant of access to the Compact's xenobiological medical database, which Eli transferred immediately to Haverford, who went very quiet for 10 minutes and then extremely loud. A formal diplomatic acknowledgement of Outpost Kether's assistance, with an event the letter described only as *A matter of internal compact security*, and a single paragraph at the end that was not formal at all. "You asked if I would be all right. The ribs are healing correctly. I am told 4 to 6 weeks, which I find an unreasonably long interval, but am accepting with what I am assured is appropriate patience. The arm is in proper medical care now. The head wound left no mark worth noting. I am told I should rest more than I currently rest, which is advice I am giving appropriate consideration, which is to say I am considering it, and then continuing. The debt stands and its form is still under consideration. It will take a form that is equal to what you actually did, not to what anyone expects, and I am being careful about that. What you actually did was this. You walked toward smoke because someone might be alive in it. You treated what you found without first establishing what it was worth. You kept the location safe before you knew why it needed keeping. You sat in a chair all night because the protocol required it. And when I told you who I was, you looked at me the same way you had been looking at me for the previous 6 hours, which was not the way anyone in 46 systems looks at me, and you said, "I know." And you did not change anything. I thought you should know that I noticed all of it. I thought you should know that it mattered. The poor judgment, as you have named it, served well. I think it usually does. Walk carefully in the expanse. Eli read it twice. He read it a third time slowly, the way you read something you want to make sure you understand the actual shape of. Then he folded it in the careful way he folded things he was going to keep, put it in the inside pocket of his field jacket, and kept it. Outside the medical bay window, the expanse went about its enormous, indifferent morning in the copper and black of its usual light. The antenna tower stood. The medkit was full and ready in its position on the counter. The smoke, when it came again, he would walk toward.